Okay, good evening again. With their kind invitation, the OSA and SPIE groups in our university, I have the opportunity to present my talk about the laser filamentation from atmospheric propagation to cancer theory. Actually, the talk is all about the propagation of short pulse laser beams in especially nonlinear optical media, and the applications arising from the properties of those optical media in some areas of interest. So my talk will start with the basic question of what's filamentation, and then I will go a little bit into the physics of filamentation, and then I'll try to explain the possible applications and the current applications of this theory and experiments to the state-of-art situation, and these are my students' current research topic, that what we can do in the medical applications with the laser filamentations. So especially concentrated on the cancer therapy. So yes, I start with what's filamentation, and I have such a picture here. This is taken from the Thesaurus.plus. This is a site where you can ask questions about the meanings of words, and they list you at least 5 meanings about the word. So when you ask for the word of filamentation, it answers like the circuitry, wireworks, circuiting, wiring, circuit systems, and so on. So what we understand from the filamentation, and especially the laser filamentation, laser filamentation is actually, or the filament propagation is actually propagation of a beam of light through a nonlinear optical medium without diffraction. You know that from your classical optics course, that whenever you send a laser beam in any optical medium, diffraction is inevitable. So a kind of propagation, a kind of wave propagation without diffraction can occur only with the debate of the physical effects, such that some nonlinear effects would overcome diffraction, so the laser beam can keep its own shape, or laser beam can undergo some self-focusing, and then it'll defocus due to some external effects. So let's go with it, and we can interpret the filaments of light. Here, by light we mean the laser light. We can interpret that laser beams as a self-guiding effect resulting from a balance between self-focusing, diffraction, and higher order defocusing. And in this case, the higher order defocusing immediately puts the nonlinear nature of the optical media on the stage. So actually, if we follow the figure here, so we have a laser beam, and if we send this laser beam with moderate power, then the laser beam would keep its coherence, and it will propagate through the medium. But if we set the initial power of the laser beam above a threshold value, which is called as the critical power of self-focusing, and it depends on the medium's properties for each media. For instance, for the propagation in the atmosphere, the critical power of self-focusing is something like on the order of a couple of gigawatts. Then, if the laser power exceeds that nonlinear power, then the medium behave non-linearly, so that as you know, that sorry. Okay, so as you know, the most significant optical property of a medium is the index of refraction, so that when you exceed the critical power, the index of refraction become a function of the intensity of the laser beam. So we will have the higher order terms in the index of refraction, which is known as the Kerr effect. I will describe it in detail in a couple of minutes. So the Kerr effect leads the laser beam to self-focus, and as a result of self-focusing, since the definition of intensity is the power per unit area, and if some laser beam focuses, which means that the area of the beam decreases, but the beam keeps its power, so that the intensity increases. And as a result of increasing in intensity, we will have the ionization process, and as a result of ionization, we will have creation of free electrons, which means that we ionize the atmosphere, or we ionize the optical medium, and we create some plasma there. And then we have some heat reservoir here, and afterwards, depending on the application of interest, we can have white light laser, or we can have some plasma filaments, or we can have some light filaments, and so on and so forth. But the story itself is that once you have a laser beam whose initial power exceeds the critical power of self-focusing, it undergoes self-focusing. As a result of self-focusing, the intensity increases, and as a result of that, we have an ionized zone in the optical media. If this optical media is the atmosphere, then you have the ionization of the atmosphere. If this optical media is somehow a solid state media, a solid state crystal, for instance, then you have the ionization in that crystal. So there will be the phase transitions from one state to the other, depending on the optical media. And then if we go into the physics of this filamentation process, I have listed some books here. These are actually very detailed. These books have very detailed discussion about the concept of filamentation, and also the concept of self-focusing. And also, yes, and also the self-focusing of femtosecond laser pulses. If you make a simple web search, you can find more than a couple of thousand papers which are written after 1995. So it's actually not a young topic of research, but it is still a very, very interesting and very, very stimulating topic of research in the area of photonics, plasma physics, and laser plasma interactions. So, of course, whenever we say a laser beam, or whenever we say a wave behavior, we have to start from the great scientist James Clerk Maxwell, and with his contribution of the displacement current here, the set of equations known as the Maxwell's equations become meaningful in the way that is written in the Bible, that and God said, and there was light, and the mechanism of that light is the set of these equations. So it is mainly the interaction between, or mainly the due to the electric fields and the magnetic fields and the sources that sources creating them. So our story starts with the Maxwell's equations, and all of you, I believe, have known that we can derive, actually, as you see, that these equations are first order differential equations, coupled differential equations in electric field and the magnetic field. And if we need to have a single equation for the electric field and the same for the magnetic field, we have to couple them, and then we reach to the wave equation. And once we derive the wave equation, if our wave, our electromagnetic wave, I mean the laser beam in this case, propagates in an optical medium rather than the free space, its space and time evolution is described by an inhomogeneous wave equation. As you see, the left-hand side of this equation is the homogeneous wave equation with the speed of propagation as the speed of light. But the right-hand side includes here the polarization field, P, and the current density, the current field, the current density, JP. Here, the polarization field arising from the properties of the optical medium that the laser beam propagates. And JP, I put the subscript P there. JP is mainly the current of the free electrons created by the ionization, so which is the current, plasma current, the free electrons of the plasma. So, and if we are in a, as I said, if we have exceeded the critical power for this medium, then our medium, the polarization, actually this is the topic that I am still discussing in my electromagnetic theory course nowadays, that the polarization and the electric fields in polarized materials and so on and so forth. So actually polarization becomes the material becomes a nonlinear material. So in order to have only the first order susceptibility here, we have to have the higher order susceptibilities. So, and this is how we, this shows how we describe the polarization. And also, if we take the plasma current into consideration, then we have to have the equation for the, which is derived from the continuity equation, of course, and the time rate of change of the current density is plus the collision frequency times the current density equals to the plasma frequency over 4 pi plus 1 over the density perturbation due to the created electrons over the density times the electric field. Here, the electric field, of course, would be the electric field of the laser field. So then if we write that, just a moment, and okay, so it actually gives us such a equation, the propagation equation, where the homogeneous part of the wave equation, which is the left-hand side, written for the electric field of the laser beam, equals to the linear and the contribution coming from the linear and the nonlinear sources. So if we describe the wave equation, homogeneous wave equation in this way, then if we assume as simple as a linearly polarized laser beam, which is whose electric field is along the x direction, for instance, we have a laser amplitude function A here. It has the exponential behavior ik0 z minus omega t, which underlines the fact that the laser beam propagates along the z direction, whereas the electric field is along the x direction. And of course, the complex conjugate of this expression is also a solution for the electric field. Similarly, with this assumption, we can write the linear sources as this and the nonlinear sources as this. Right? So actually, mathematically speaking, writing down the sources in this way is a straightforward application. But in physical applications or in physical modeling, we have to know the physics behind the linear and the nonlinear sources very well. Anyway, this description actually reduces our wave equation in a wave-like equation for the laser amplitude A, R, and T. Here you have, depending on the laser at hand, here you have the opportunity to choose either the Gaussian beams, which are mostly used in filamentation research, or a square beam, or any kind of laser beam. Here, this A describes the amplitude function of the laser beam, and apparently SL and SNL terms here describes the amplitudes of the linear and nonlinear physical concepts given contributing to the propagation equation. So if we take the linear source terms into consideration, actually those linear sources are those you are familiar with from the optics course, that this is the diffraction and dispersion and the obvious effects in linear optical medium. And if we write the amplitude in such a beautiful way, with some alpha parameter and beta parameter, so our alpha parameters appears as the diffraction, dispersion parameters in terms of the beta, and beta depends on the frequency of the laser beam. So in these treatments, you can see that the beta 0 corresponds to the wave number of the laser beam, which is actually defined from the laser wavelength. And B1 appears as the inverse of the group velocity, and for the propagation in the atmosphere, we assume the group velocity is almost the speed of light in the atmosphere. And here, the B2 is important, which is the group velocity dispersion parameter, which would actually try to balance the diffraction and the dispersion in the story. So then, if we look at the nonlinear sources, what could be the nonlinear sources in this story? We have the physical effects of the nonlinear Kerr effect, which I shortly mentioned in the beginning as the due to the change in the index of refraction of the optical media, where N0 is the index of refraction of the atmosphere, for instance, and we all know that it is almost unity, plus the N2, this is the second order index of refraction, times the intensity. So this effect arises because of the bound electrons, which are created, bound electrons, which are present in the atmosphere. You all know what Raman scattering is from your modern physics courses. So another effect is the Raman scattering, then the scattering of the charges while an electromagnetic field propagates in the optical media. And the other effects are, I believe, new for you. The one is the plasma creation. Plasma creation is actually is a result of the optical field ionization, and which means that instead of the neutrals and the bound electrons in the atmosphere, when you exceed some intensity, the ionization process takes place, optical field ionization takes place, and there will be an increase in free electron density, and we have to take this effect into consideration while writing down our propagation equation. Similarly, we have to take the effect of wake fields into consideration while we have to take the wake fields into consideration while we are writing down the propagation equation. Wake fields means that the wake fields, actually you may visualize them like that. Think about a fast boat moving on sea, and think about the waves behind them. Okay, so the rectangular shape of the wave, which are actually traveling with the group velocity of the boat, are called as the wake field. Okay, so this wake field is actually very important in the area of research of the plasma particle accelerators. We have some relativistic effects depending on the optical media. So the relativistic effects arise from the coherent motion of electrons, and also we have the ionization effects, which are actually very similar to the plasma effects. So those ionizations can be the multiphoton ionization. The mechanism of ionization can be multiphoton ionization or avalanche ionization, or any other ionization process, which is defined by the Keldysh parameter. So Keldysh parameter defines, depending on the intensity and the power of your laser beam, Keldysh parameter is a very practical tool to tell you which of the mechanisms of ionizations would be the dominant one in your calculations. So then if we add all those effects, you see we have such a beautiful equation, a beautiful propagation equation for the laser field amplitude A. So, which includes the effects of the plasma with the plasma frequency omega p here, which includes the Kerr effect, where the N2 actually defines the nonlinear power of self-focusing here. And we have the relativistic effects arising from the coherent motion of the electrons. We have the wake fields, which depends on the created electron density in the atmosphere, and also the ionization, as well as the Raman scattering term. Here is the oscillation function for the Raman scattering, QT. Okay, so if this is the case, and we have such a long equation to solve in the story of the laser filamentation, in practical applications or in the theoretical approach, we have mainly two regimes of propagation in this case. The one is the low intensity propagation regime, and those regimes of propagation is of course described with respect to a critical intensity. For instance, if we are talking about the atmospheric propagation, this critical intensity is 10 to the power 13 watt per centimeter square for the atmosphere. If the intensities are below that critical intensity, then you have you're in the low intensity propagation regime, which tells us that the laser beam goes as the pulse with the group velocity, and we have the frequencies here, and actually we have a laser envelope. All right, so that laser envelope propagates in the medium normally. While the beam is propagating, there is a battle between the physical effects spatially, these effects are the diffraction and the Kerr effect. So Kerr effect tries to kill the diffraction and tends to the laser beam focuses spatially, which means that there will be a decrease in the spot size of the laser beam, and temporally, if you look at the pulse length of the laser beam, then the battle is in between dispersion and the group velocity dispersion, the B2 terms in the previous equation. Once the intensity of the laser beam in this optical media increases beyond the critical intensity, then we find ourselves in the regime of the high intensity propagation. So in the high intensity propagation regime, we have the very interesting and very beautiful physical effects of ionization, plasma formation, optical and plasma filaments propagating in this there with the modification of the refractive index, as I have mentioned. So we are in the high intensity propagation regime. Our story starts with the plasma filaments, and they go with the optical filaments. And as a result of the optical filaments, we have the white light generation. We have all the frequencies, all possible frequencies propagate together so that we have a white light. All right. And I won't take your time to take too much of your time with the detailed theoretical calculations, but believe me, those calculations are very nice and very fun. But what we see in the low intensity propagation regime, actually the laser spot size, the spatial size of the laser beam decreases because Kerr effect becomes dominating one. Where at the same time in the time scale, we measure the time evolution of the laser packet with the pulse length, which is a function of propagation distance here, Tz, where both the spot size and the pulse length decreases. As a result of these decrease in the spot size, actually creates a very, very sharp increase in the intensity. Here, the intensity for some particular values. This intensity is plotted in the normalized manner with respect to the initial intensity. As the spot size decreases, the intensity increases enormously. As the pulse length decreases, of course, the laser power increases, right? So in this case, actually, this is the first two graphs are for the ordinary propagation without having any focusing effects or any chirping effects. Okay, but if we increase the low intensity propagation regime, allow us or it opens the door of a very interesting area of research, which is actually the very long distance propagation of the high power laser beams. So by playing with the focusing properties of the laser beam and also the chirping, so we can first induce a increase in the pulse length and then an inevitable decrease due to the Kerr effect, and also the decrease in the pulse length of the laser beam due to the group velocity dispersion. So we can have a modulated, or we can have a controlled behavior of the intensity increase. Also, what we are doing here is that we try to arrange the distance at which we start the ionization process, and then also the power would behave accordingly. And for some other values of the focusing and the group focusing and the chirping parameters, you may have some different power and intensity figures here. Now the situation becomes more interesting in the high intensity propagation regime. Actually, I would like to thank my student, master student Atalay Deveci, for these graphs. So these would be the graphs in his master thesis. So actually, while we were in the low intensity propagation regime, of course, since we assume no dissipation rather than the change in the spot size and the pulse length, the energy of the laser beam is conserved in the low intensity propagation regime. But once the ionization takes place, which means that once the number of electrons, number of free electrons start increasing in this optical media, so the energy required for this ionization is taken from the energy of the laser beam, of course. There is nothing else to take the energy, so there are no other energy reservoirs. So then, as a result of this ionization, the energy decreases. Of course, the power decreases. So we have an increase in the number density of the electrons, which means that actually by inducing the ionization in an optical media, although this media is initially is an insulator, is a dielectric or whatever it is, but you make it a conductor, right? By creating free electrons, you know that the only conductors may have the free charges on their surfaces. So we have the surfaces of free charges, which are the optical filaments and then the plasma filaments in the optical media. So this is actually the main story about the theory of the filamentation. Each and every term that I've addressed here has some importance depending on the applications of interest. There are a lot of applications of the short pulse laser beam filamentation in optical media, and the main actually up to now, let's say, the main concentration was the understanding the filamentation and making use of the applications in the atmosphere, because in the atmosphere there are numerous fields that we introduce the applications, one of which is the white light continuum generation. So this is very important for the information transfer. Another area of applications is, of course, the defense technologies, aerosol detection, optical blindness, and so on and so forth. Since you are creating a very high intensity at a remote distance in the atmosphere, or you are creating a very high intensity in a desired distance of a solid-state chip, for instance. All kinds of light detection and ranging techniques, which are known as the LIDAR techniques in the literature, laser imaging and laser spectroscopy. For instance, the laser-induced breakdown spectroscopy at remote distances would be a very another interesting applications of this filamentation processes. You can create virtual antennas, again, for the telecommunication purposes. Then, since you are creating some conducting layers at some desired points in the atmosphere, so you can easily send the signals and then reflect them back from those conducting plasma layers. So those filaments behave as virtual antennas. And also we have numerous applications in solids and in liquids and many more. Those are the applications actually from 1995 to the 2010s or so. But afterwards, with the huge interest of the medicine in laser beams, which is started with the eye surgeries and also the dental surgeries and dental applications and so on and so forth. Short pulse lasers become very important in medicine. And once they go into the stage of the medicine or the medical applications, of course, new ideas arise. And actually those, oh, by the way, let me show you some pictures of this. Is actually how we control the thunders, right? This is the atmospheric sensing, the LiDAR technique. This is a picture created by a LiDAR technique, or this is what I told you as a guiding laser beam or the laser filament, or the conductive medium shows a guiding for the electrical communication. So now if we turn back to the applications in medicine, the first applications can be seen in the eye surgeries. So since we have a very short area and you need a very precise touch, whatever you need to correct in that area, so the short pulses and the filamentation produce a very nice answer or technique to this. And the same technique can be used in the area of lens formation. Or you can use the same technique. For instance, here, this is the graph of actually a meniscus surgery. So whenever you need high powers and whenever you need precisions in medicine, instead of the surgeon blades, you may use the femtosecond laser pulses, and you may use the inevitable process of filamentation, and you can take benefit of them. It's obvious that the laser precision, as short as its spot size, which is controllable by you, is better than the hand of any surgeon, right? So this is the main idea, actually, how the lasers go into the area of the medicine and also the surgery. And very, very recently, actually, you can see a tumor here, a cancer tumor here. And this tumor, this is actually a control tumor. And after treatment, you see that without any damage in the neighboring cells, in the neighboring tissues, okay, you can get rid of this tumor. Actually, this is a very interesting picture for me, because what I am dreaming about is very similar to that picture, but not for those kinds of big tumors. This is something like, you see, there is a scale which shows the 5 millimeter range, right? Not for those big tumors. These big tumors can be handled very easily with the knives of the surgeons, okay? But what I am thinking is that, what about if we have tumors which are in the, or which are whose size is on the order of, let's see, a couple of microns, okay? So now then our knife, the surgeon knife, must be as much as on the order of that order. So you can use laser filamentation to address remotely where they have to kill the cancer cells, and then the treatment like that would be very good inside the human body without using any knives. This is what I am thinking nowadays. Okay, let's go through. Actually, I have listed some papers written in the mid 2000s and then coming to the newer dates. You see, they have reproductive death of cancer cells induced by femtosecond laser pulses, and this paper is written, published in the International Journal of Radiation and Biology. In the Journal of Contemporary Physics, we have femtosecond lasers in biology, nanoscale surgery with ultra-fast optics. That's what I'm concentrated on. And also cancer radiotherapy based on femtosecond infrared laser beam filamentation yielding ultra-high dose rays and zero entrance dose. So this is also a very important study. Actually, what I am suggesting is that you can send a laser beam through the human body, okay, where you know in which you know the place of the tumor, okay. So this self-focusing process help you to guide the laser beam inside the human body, but while doing that, you have no harm to the human body unless the cancer cells. That is actually that's actually a way of remote surgery. So this actually opens the door of this idea, and that's what I'm trying to do. Actually, the property of self-focusing resulting in a catastrophic breakdown may be useful in laser surgery. Arranging the focus locations at the distance at which the intensity reaches the optical field ionization limit, then you create plasma. And creating the free electrons from the tumor means that you are killing the tumor, and by using that you may get rid of the cancer tumors in human body, and you can do these kinds of surgeries without using any blades. Actually, that's all I want to talk about for today. Thank you very much for your interest, and if you have any questions, I will be glad to answer them. Thank you very much.
Teşekkürler hocam. Benim bir sorum vardı da tam duyamadım. LIDAR'da acaba nasıl bir kullanım alanı var bunun?
LIDAR dediğimiz Light Detection and Object Recognition.
Evet.
Şeyi yarattığınızda, laser beam'le o free elektronları yarattığınızda aslında orada bir spektroskopi yapabiliyorsunuz. O spektroskopiyi yaptığınızda tıpkı gece görüşü gibi backscatter eden sinyallerden, filamentten backscatter eden sinyallerden ortamın fotoğrafını çekmiş oluyorsunuz.
Evet hocam. Ben de aslında LIDAR üzerine biraz çalıştım da.
Evet.
Hani normal bir infrared lazerden farkı nedir diye sormak istedim aslında.
Normal infrared lazerlerde bu benim demin gösterdiğim resim gibi resimleri çok daha kolay çekiyorsunuz. Çünkü onları biliyorsunuz çok kısa distance'larda çalıştırabiliyoruz. Yani özellikle kısa mesafelerde çalıştırıyorsunuz. Hı hı. Şimdi aynı görüntülemeyi remote bir distance'da, yani kilometrelerce ötede ve habersiz yapmanız gerektiğinde önce lazer beam'ini oraya yollamanız ama ondan sonra orada bir şekilde sinyal alacağınız bir şey yaratmanız gerekiyor. O yarattığınız şey işte plazma. Aynı lidar tekniğini bu sefer plazmadan backscatter eden sinyallerle alıyorsunuz. Yani remote görüntüleme sistemi diyelim. Hı hı. Okay.
Teşekkürler hocam.
Ben teşekkür ederim. Any questions, comments?
Hocam bu yüksek precision'lı ameliyatlarda 2018'de Nobel alan konu bir an unuttum. Optical tweezer sistemi evet, kullanılıyordu. Bu yöntemde de aynı sistemle mi ameliyat
yok, yok, o aynı sistemle değil. Bu yöntem tamamen şunu öngörüyor. Aslında bir ameliyat yapmıyorsunuz. Bu remote bir distance'da focus edeceği, yani fokus noktasını ayarlayabiliyorsunuz ve o zamana kadar intensity'yi ayarladığınız için aslında insan vücuduna, ama bu yani benim dediğim gibi üstünde çalıştığım ve hayal ettiğim bir şey. Daha yapıldığını görmedim ama teorisi almost hazır gibi. Belki Atalay da bir şeyler söylemek isteyebilir bu konuda. Şöyle, İnsan vücuduna lazer beam'le giriyorsunuz. İçinde o focusing'i yarattığınızda aslında o küçük, yani o high precision'a ulaşıyorsunuz. Ve orada benim düşüncem hücre hücre lazer kanser hücrelerini yüksek intensitelerle yakabilme ihtimali. Dolayısıyla aynı teknik değil.
Anladım, evet. Ve bu bahsettiğiniz teknik aslında optik cımbızdan çok daha
Evet, daha
kullanışlı
etkili.
ve etkili görünüyor.
Evet, bir de optik cımbızın yine de etrafında bir zararı var. Burada siz hücre boyutunda yapacağınız için, yani ablation'ı birazcık termodinamik hesaplarının yapılması gerekir tabii, ama hücre boyutunda yakma yapacağınız için sadece o tümörden size free elektronlar çıkacak orada.
Anladım hocam. Çok önü açık ve çığır açıcı derler ya, tam olarak öyle bir alan gibi görünüyor.
İnşallah, inşallah. Ben yani teorisini ve uygulanabilirliğini ortaya koyabilirsek ondan sonra zaten herhalde experimental çalışmalarda başlar diye düşünüyorum, ama daha vakit var gibi.
Anladım hocam. Experimental sonuçları aldığınız zaman ya da başlayacağınız zaman bir seminer daha almak isteriz sizden.
Evet de deneyi ben yapmayacağım. Ben önce bir teorik modelini yapayım. Ondan sonra zaten öyle bir şey olursa seve seve tabii.
Hocam bu ameliyat kısmını herhangi bir kesik olmadan yapmak da mümkün olabilir mi ileride mesela?
Kesik olmayacak zaten. Yani laser beam'i yollayacağız. Laser beam deriden geçerken düşük bir enerjide, düşük bir intensite olacak. Dolayısıyla yakmayacak diye düşünüyorum. Ama tabii onların bütün bu parametrelerin çok iyi ayarlanması lazım. Yani atmosfer için yaptığımız aslında hesaplardaki tüm optical parametreleri biological tissue'nun optical parametrelerine çevirerek tekrar bakıp oradaki işte hangi intensity değerinde temperature nereye çıkıyor, o yakıyor mu yakmıyor mu diye bakıyoruz. Ama temel idea, yani benim kafamdaki temel fikir şu: tümörün olduğu yere gidene kadar sanki işte, yani bardağın içinden kırınıma uğrayan bir ışın geçiyormuş gibi gidecek. Sonuçta bardağa da zarar vermiyor, içindeki suya da zarar vermiyor. Neredeki tümör var, orada intensite yükselecek ve onu yakıyor olacak.
Anladım hocam.
Hocam ben de bir şey eklemek isterim izniniz varsa.
Tabii ki Atalar.
Şimdi arkadaşlar şeyle ilgili çok kafası karışmış olabilir. Böyle birdenbire vücudun içinden gidecek de kanser hücresini bu nasıl bulacak diye kafaları karışmış olabilir. Zaten şu an en büyük sorunlardan biri bu. Selectivity durumu radyoterapide de. Şimdi aslında bunun temel şeylerinden biri biraz biyolojinin bulguları. Kanser hücrelerinin diğer hücrelere oranla hem normal kırınım indeksleri hem de non-linear kırınım indeksleri değişiyor. Bununla ilgili çok yeni çalışmalar var ve bunun da hücre çeperindeki insülin reseptörü miktarıyla doğru orantılı olduğunu söyleyenler de var. O yüzden mikro bazda düşündüğümüz zaman bütün vücudun içinden geçecek, ama mesela işte bu çok fazla insülin reseptörü olan bölgelerde öyle bir focusing'e uğrayacak ki onun etrafında zaten bir plazma etkisi yaratacak. Ve haliyle bu olay bir collateral damage olmadan sadece fokus ettiği hücre ya da hücrelerde bir plazma etkisi görmüş olacağız. Yani temel sebep, temel düşünce biçimi aslında bakarsanız bu hücrelerin optik olarak diğer hücrelerden farklı özellikler göstermesiyle oluyor. Teşekkür ederim hocam. Gerçekten çok güzel bir sunumdu.
Ben teşekkür ederim Atalar. Çok güzel bir katkıydı.
Hocam peki bu kanser hücrelerinin kronom indislerini bir external yolla arttırmaya yönelik bir yöntem var mıdır?
Bildiğim kadarıyla yok. Ama ben optikçi de değilim. Yani hani optical property'leri de herhangi bir medium'un nasıl değiştirilir onu bilmiyorum. Ama hemen aklıma gelen bir yöntemi olabileceğini de sanmıyorum. Çünkü hep deriz ya biz derslerde kimi şeyler malzemenin material property'leridir. Yani kırınım indeksi böyle bir şeydir. Dielektrik constant'ı ya da dielektrik tensörü öyle bir şeydir falan. O malzemenin karakteristiği olduğu için onu değiştirmek demek aslında malzemeye hani biz damage etrafına hiç damage vermeden sadece orayı hedefleyelim diye düşünürken malzemeye zarar vermektir diye düşünüyorum. Dolayısıyla daha büyük yan etkileri olabilir onun. Ama dediğim gibi benim alanım değil yani optik property değiştirmek ya da dope etmek falan o birazcık daha solid state'in işine giriyor.
Hı hı.
Vücudun içinde sanki opak olmayan bir medyumda ilerler gibi ilerleyebilmesi bana çok garip geliyor gerçekten hocam. Yani bunu cama örneğin işleme yaparken bile zorlandığımızı düşünürsek şu anda yani
Evet.
kendi çalışmalarımızda bu kadar opak bir ortamda ve farklılık gösteren yani farklı hücrelerin içinden geçebiliyor olması gerçekten çok garip.
Şimdi orada zaten işte ortamın şimdi siz camda zorluk çekiyorsunuz ama camda çalıştığınız yani camın üstüne bir şey yazarken çalıştığınız fizik tamamen lineer fizik. Yani hologramlar falan filan diye de baksanız o tamamen bildiğimiz lineer optical property'leriyle alakalı bir şey. Burada şimdi önemli olan şey lazer pulse'ının çok kısa olması, intensity'sinin de çok yüksek olması. Yani initial power'ının çok yüksek olması. Şimdi bu yüksek initial power'ı geniş bir pulse'la önce verip daha sonra medium'un içinde daraltırsanız opasite artık sizin kontrol edebildiğiniz bir parametre oluyor. Sadece malzemenin bir özelliği değil, sizin non-linear index of refraction'la refraction termleriyle kontrol edebildiğiniz bir parametre oluyor. Burada tabii yani ben şimdi bu çalışmalarda etkili olan şey işte beta 2'ya kadar yani kör efekti eklemek. Kör efektin de higher order termleri var. Beta 3, beta 4 falan diye. Ne kadar çok o parametreleri dikkate alırsanız o kadar çok malzemenin opasitesini, malzemenin optik şeylerini sizin lazer beam'iniz açısından ayarlayabilirsiniz.
Çok ilginç gerçekten bana göre.
Evet. Başka sorumuz var mı?
Hocam, bu çalışmalar deneysel olarak yapılmaya başlanırsa eğer hangi dalga boyunda ilk denemeleri yapardınız?
Şimdiye kadar yapılan yani benim teorik hesaplarımda da kullandığım çalışmalar bu temelde Fransa'da Terramobil grubunun yaptığı deneyler var. École Polytechnique'de bir grubun yaptığı deneyler var. Bir de Amerika'da Naval Research Center'ın yaptığı deneyler var. Burada 800 nanometrelik lazerler kullanılıyor. Ama 600 ile 800 nanometre arası laser beamler diye öngörülüyor bu çalışmalar için.
O zaman deri yüzeyinin biraz altında kalıyor. Yani
Evet.
uygulanabilecek yüzeyler.
Evet, evet. O işte ne kadar altında olduğu da tümörü nerede detekte ettiğinize bağlı. Orada fokus ettiriyorsunuz.
Anladım.
Hocam
Yani
bu
önce deriyi koruyoruz. Deri lazeri görmüyormuş gibi oluyor. Ondan sonra içeride sadece lazeri görecek olan katman hastalıklı katman oluyor.
Teşekkürler hocam.
Ben teşekkür ederim.
hocam bu wavelength'ler göze zarar vermez mi? Lidarda çünkü 1550 nanometre kullanılıyor retinaya ulaşmadığı
Evet.
için.
Evet.
Bu
Göze yani short pulse ve high power laserların tamamı göze zarar verir. Ama bu zaten görerek yapacağınız bir şey değil. Bu otomatik olarak yapacağınız bir şey.
yani göz ameliyatlarında da kullanılabilir demiştiniz sanırım.
Göz ameliyatında kullanılıyor. Gözün sadece işte mesela mercekte bir yeri düzeltecekseniz o demin benim sunumda gösterdiğim resmi hatırlarsan merceğin sadece düzeltilecek yerine vuruluyor.
Hı hı.
Yani orada bir görme olayı falan yok.
Anladım hocam.
Yani şey gibi düşünün böyle mesh gibi bilgisayar ekranı var ya orada yanmış olan piksellerin sadece o piksellere vurarak düzeltiyorsunuz. Bütün ekrana bir zarar vermiyorsunuz.
Anladım.
Dilerseniz ufak ufak bitirebiliriz hocam.
Tamam.
Başka sorusu olan yoksa da bir şey eklemek isterseniz.
Ben katıldığınız ve dinlediğiniz için teşekkür ederim. Eğer konu ilginizi çektiyse daha bu konuda yapacak çok şey var. Tüm fikirlere ve tüm ben bu konuda çalışırım diyecek heyecanlı arkadaşlara her zaman ihtiyaç vardır. Hepiniz more than welcome in my group.
Benim açıkçası çok ilgimi çekti ama ben application alanına daha meyilliyim. Eğer Türkiye'de application'ı yapmak isterseniz her zaman katılmak isterim.
Bakalım öyle bir şansımız olacaksa. O zaman zaten öyle bir deney grubumuzla kurmak zorunda kalacağız ama şimdilik zaten biz teori, modelleme ve numerik çözümler aşamasındayız.
Anladım hocam. O zaman teşekkür ederiz bugün geldiğiniz için. Tekrar edeyim benim için ve bence çoğu arkadaş için çok ilgi çekici bir konuydu. Çok
Ben
güzel bir
teşekkür ederim.
sunumdu. İleride bu çalışmanın ileri adımlarında ya da başka çalışmalarda sizinle yine seminer yapmak isteriz topluluk olarak.
Teşekkür ederim.